You are listening to The Building Code, a podcast by Buildertrend where we talk all things technology and construction. Be sure to stick around to the end of the episode where you can find out how to be a part of the Building Code crew. Let's get it. Hey everybody, welcome to The Building Code. I'm your host, Paul Worth. Thank you so much for joining again. This week's episode is really awesome. I have a friend of mine and a celebrity in the industry. He's going to hate that I said that. But Nick Schiffer from NS Builders in Boston. He's a longtime Buildertrend user. More importantly, he's got some great podcasts and just has a ton of great knowledge about being an owner. So very happy to bring on Nick. All right, Nick, thanks for joining us. You're out of Boston right now?
Yes, I am.
That's your office?
It is. Yeah, podcast booth, office, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, you got to. We'll talk about your podcast for sure because people need to be listening to that if they're not. I'm sure, actually, I would bet that a good majority of people, if they're listening to our podcast, they're listening to Modern Craftsman. So
I hope so.
We got some good. If
and
not,
vice versa.
Yeah, if not, we'll definitely get them to do that. I think it's so funny in the background. You have a bunch of these blueprints. I just feel like that's like a stock thing at every construction shop.
It is. It's like, and it's funny because John gave me flack because it holds like 6 blueprints. Yeah. And I only had 3 sitting on my desk, and I was like, hey, it's a wine bottle holder.
Oh,
actually.
Okay.
And I threw it up there, and I threw the plans on it, and it's like those plans are now I don't even use them.
Right, exactly.
I thought it would be helpful, and it's those are going to sit there for 5 years.
Perfect. Well, they're gonna look good in all the Zoom meetings.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So that's a good question. So obviously we're into 8 months of the pandemic. And we can definitely talk about how you were feeling and sort of how you navigated that, which was a pretty scary time for everybody. But have you been doing a lot of Zoom calls? Like, does that exist with potential clients and clients?
Yeah. So we actually had one client, and we were just chatting off air about it, but we had one client where we never met in person.
Seriously?
Wow. Met over Zoom, interviewed over Zoom, reviewed plans over Zoom, signed a contract over Zoom, went to start construction over Zoom. Well, went to start construction with a Zoom, like, hey, kick off. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that project walked away. And I do attribute part of it to Zoom. And no offense to Zoom, but I think the thing that we had to navigate was the people reading and realizing like who was the right fit for us. Because we had a second project very similar. We went really far down the road because when all this, like when the pandemic started, it was, I'm like, all right, sales mode. Like we have to make sure we're mentally and financially prepared. So I was going after every project, and I was everything, like every single, I was built like drawing a funnel for every client. Like, where are they? I need to call them today. I need to email them tomorrow. And we got to far down these roads with these clients. And I remember one of them I met in person, and we walked the job. And I was like, wow, I missed every red flag.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's like, this just isn't our job. And I walked away from it. Had a few others that we had met and, met with. But yeah, to answer your question, Zoom's been huge. We're meeting with clients on a weekly basis over Zoom. Where, we're not doing our weekly meetings on site. The site stays active with our guys, but the client just we'll do a check-in with them, reviewing drawings with architects over Zoom. Even networking, it's like with people that we want to meet or architects, it starts with Zoom, and it's kind of like the beginning of dating. Right. And then when we're comfortable enough to meet in person, it's like, all right, I'll grab my mask, you grab yours, we'll go to a coffee shop and we'll grab a coffee and sit outside.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. So you know how like when you text somebody or email somebody, the context, you can't really tell. I always have a joke with my wife, like when you text somebody, sure, that's like the worst. Like when you ask somebody like, hey, can you bring a blah blah blah? I mean, they go sure. You're like, oh, do they hate me? Or is that like sure?
Every time you've met my wife.
Yeah,
she's cool as hell.
Yeah.
But I get home, I'm like, what are you so mad at? She's like, what are you talking about?
Right.
I'm like, you look at the text you sent me. She said, Nick, I'm dealing with the kids. Like you asked if I needed anything, and I said no.
Yeah.
That was it. I was like, well, I wanted like a no thank you smiley face, and then I would have known you weren't mad at me, right?
Throw an emoji. That's funny. Yeah, emojis can tell would be actually go a long way. And maybe that's why they're so prevalent, is because they can sort of deliver that context of what a word can't.
And it's funny, like with clients, I'll I try to be real personal in like emails and text,
Mm-hmm.
but get to my point, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
business oriented, but
Mm-hmm.
I'll add an exclamation point. And I've had someone be like, "What are you yelling for?" I'm like, "Whoa, no, that was supposed to be an excitement.
That's
Like
the other thing.
can't wait to get started, not like,
I'll
it's
find
just
myself doing way too many exclamation points to bring some sort of color to it. Although I'm not that kind of excited person. Like,
it's
sure,
like
exclamation point, blah, blah, blah. Exclamation point is like, stop.
yeah, right.
I don't
And it's
know.
like, what's he on? Like, what's his problem right now? Like, he's yelling, sure.
Too
Like,
many
now he's
coffees.
really mad at me.
That's funny. So, guy, we'll have to talk to other contractors about that. If Zoom has maybe led to a situation where you maybe wouldn't have with being in person. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just think the human interaction, at least for what we do, like we're so involved, we're
Mm-hmm.
so collaborative with our approach, and we're working, on, high end homes, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of emotional, um, investment on all parties here. So it's to not have that face to face time and that in person time, especially early on. I think it's just way harder to filter whether or not the project is the right fit. After that, I think it's great. I think it's a great tool.
Yeah.
I think it's great for check-ins. I
Mm-hmm.
think, reviewing contracts. A lot of stuff has become more digital, and that was, I knew when going into this, regardless if we were going to get shut down or what, is that I wanted to streamline the things that we did by digitizing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
it. Our contracts, like the back and forth emailing, downloading a PDF,
Mm-hmm.
finding a like whatever it was, like making this stuff easier to navigate through, today's world, right?
Yeah.
This is just a massive learning opportunity for the entire world, but like we'll speak specifically to our industry. I think it's a massive opportunity for all of us to learn on how to improve efficiency.
Yeah, a lot of people say it was coming. It was slowly coming, and this was just a big push forward. The pandemic, which I think
Totally.
was
Yeah.
one of the positive things we can come out of this. The other positive thing is that construction really has boomed. Which is, what do you
It's
attribute that
interesting.
to?
Yeah.
I get
I,
some of it, right? Like the general thing would be like people are in their home more. They're staring at the wall they've always hated. Blah blah blah.
right.
Sure, is there a little bit of that? Yeah, but new home construction is booming. Like everything is. So what is that?
But at least for us, I think it's just the everyone exiting the cities,
Oh,
like,
really?
wanting more space. Like, hey, you know what? Maybe it is time to have a backyard. Maybe this is an opportunity
I see.
to actually move away from the hustle and bustle. And because let's think about why people live in the city, right?
Right.
For work, it's
Mm-hmm.
close to work, cutting it down commute. Well, if the entire world goes work from home,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, wait, I can do my job from home. I don't have to live in the city anymore.
Right.
Let's take the $1 million condo we have and go buy a house 4 times the size for $1 million in the
Mm-hmm.
suburbs.
Well, I think the other thing is too is like it's not just people who work for the company X that's downtown Boston, but it's like even if I think people felt like they had to be in the mix of things, like networking and like having coffees and like they would be missing out. And I think this made
Yeah.
people realize no. If you have a strong online network and you have strong relationships, there's plenty of spaces to do that online, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. And, I don't think that's going to go away, but I think that's where you're seeing a lot of the people that have made it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're comfortable, they've networked, they're in a
Mm-hmm.
position where they're really content in their career, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
continue to grow, but they don't need to continue to be part of the scene,
Right.
right?
So they realize
Where it's
that.
like
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to. We're at a point where we were always planning to leave the city.
Mm-hmm.
This is an opportunity where we can leave the city and not have it impact my work, or I'm out of work and it's time for me to move. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
let me restart my life now instead of restarting it today and in 5 years.
Right.
So I just think the new home sales, people are looking for more space. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even I live in the city, like,
Mm-hmm.
in South Boston, and the market is ludicrous. Like the amount of rentals right now is in the hundreds, and it's like the rent rate is so low, like so low,
Mm-hmm.
where to the point where my wife and I joke, it's like we could rent our house out
Mm-hmm.
for more money than our mortgages and then go rent a place down the street for less money.
Right. And
Like
still come up.
being this
Yeah.
like yeah, and still being in a great spot.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think people are realizing that it's time it's an opportunity for them to reconsider the city lifestyle.
Yeah. That's
I
super
don't think it
interesting.
will ever go away.
No.
I like the media says that New York is dying. I don't think that's
Right.
necessarily the case.
Jerry Seinfeld had something to say about that. Which is
Yeah.
funny. No, I don't think it will go away. I think there's just a restructuring, and the people who really want to be there will be there, and new people will come in. By the way, if
100%.
right, it's just sort of a shuffling of everything, which I think is really interesting. We don't have that issue here in Nebraska, the big city, that kind of thing. But so I guess for people who don't know, which there are probably very few, since you have like 125,000 followers on Instagram. But tell the listeners about NS Builders, just brief overview, you and your team.
Yeah, sure. So I started the company as a carpentry company 7 years ago, and we've grown into a almost 20-person high-end home building and remodeling company here in Boston. We focus on, primarily remodels and renovations, getting into some new construction, custom homes. And we also have a in-house cabinet and millwork shop where we handle everything from design, fabrication, as well as installation.
All right. So if you're in Boston, look up Nick. If not, doesn't really matter. Tell your friends.
You can still look me up.
You can still look him up. Yeah, follow him on Instagram. This is the third time on the podcast, so hopefully people know you already. But
they can follow me on TikTok too. I joined TikTok.
Oh my!
But I'm just not good at it.
I don't know I still don't know what it is.
I've been watching those shuffle videos. I just can't figure it out.
I mean, it's so funny. My wife's on TikTok for her business, and then my kids are, of course, on it. And there was my daughter, who's 11, was helping hang the lights on our roof, and I look over and she's doing a TikTok on the roof. I was like, okay, this has gone too far. Stop.
Yeah. It's like, Dad, I got 1 million likes.
She's like
overnight.
Check it out. But no, I mean, TikTok, I think is it's just so big. You got to kind of like, when those things are happening, you got to do it. And that's a good point for people to know. You've really doubled down, I guess. You've invested time and money into your social media. We've talked at length about how that's helped your business. I still don't think enough construction companies are doing it, but what that decision came pretty organically, or what was that like for you?
It did. I mean, to think back early on when I started the company, it was myself and a helper at the time, my cousin or my brother, but I just wanted to share. Like, I've always been I've always liked to share what I do. It's just like I have fun with it. I like getting feedback. I like, knowing how I can improve. And the best way to do that is to kind of put myself, put the work on a pedestal and have everyone knock it off.
Yeah.
Right. So early on, I did that through, I realized social media was an opportunity to do that. And I remember, I actually remember who it was and what they reached out to me for, but someone had reached out saying, hey, listen, I follow you. I think we should connect, and I'd like you to do some work for us. And it was like right then and there. I was like, I can use this as a platform
for sure.
So my personality, like it's obsessive. Like when I realize something works, or when I realize I like something, I want to know everything about it.
You go.
And it's like, then I went down this rabbit hole. Like, I caught on to Gary Vaynerchuk when, he was just starting out in like the social media world. I shouldn't say just starting out, but like early days of him, and just paying attention to what he was doing. And that's who, really I attribute a lot of what I brought into my industry, is that he was just documenting, doing the selfie stories, talking about it on Snapchat, on Instagram. And I just started realizing that this was an opportunity for us to showcase our work. And I wanted to do it in as organically as possible. It's grown. And now we have like Doug on our team who handles all the awesome video that we do. So there is this, level of filter to what you get to see, right? Like the cool work. But I've used that side of it to really market towards who I want to be working for. And, and I have to think of that really carefully, where it's like, yeah, we might do a lot of traditional work, but ideally I want to do more contemporary. So I have to be selective with what I show, because if I keep showing that I'm doing traditional, I just get hired for traditional.
Right.
So we've been able to curate like, hey, this is the work we do, and this is what we want to do. and just be really open about it. And then, through others like LinkedIn and YouTube, there's always all these avenues where I get to share different aspects of the business, where it's like sometimes I'm talking peer to peer, sometimes I'm talking to a client, sometimes I'm talking to a prospective client. So all of those things, are I have to consider those. I have to consider those things, in depending on what platform I'm
Yeah,
on.
it's weird. I don't know if they started this way, but every platform's got its own identity, and it's becoming more
Yeah.
and more clear every day. Like
Right.
LinkedIn, definitely business. Like it's professionals connecting, in my opinion. Twitter feels like it's just news, right? Like
Yeah.
it's sort of like what's going on industry wise. Facebook feels like it's morphing into this whole other thing. Like
Yeah, it's
I
like
don't know what that.
community based, right?
Yeah,
It's like you want to talk to, your neighbors.
right.
And the thing about Facebook, and this is something that like I shouldn't be necessarily spending my time doing it, but I actually really enjoy the marketing and sales targeting side of things,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like when I start understanding the process of sales and the psychology behind sales, and then connecting that to, Facebook ad trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I can traffic an ad to you, Paul, in Nebraska, it's like I only want Paul to see it.
Yeah, it's
And I
wild.
can go through this list and like get you to see just an ad for what I want. So that's been an interesting kind of like side project I work on
Yeah.
at night, right? It's
Yeah.
like, hey, if I want to work for a particular client, I have the opportunity to only talk to those clients.
That is what's great about that. Yeah. You mentioned something like the type of work you want to do, contemporary. What's that about? Is that like just your own sort of like what like how your eye sees things, that like that's what you like, or is
Yeah, I
there
mean,
a clientele
there
associated with is it both?
uh no, I don't think it's a clientele. Um I say that, but I also wonder if I am wrong there, because contemporary tends to be more expensive when it's done well.
Right.
And that's when I say done well, I think that's really key, because I feel like the word modern and contemporary and luxury are so diluted these days, where it's, modern, like that's not true modern architecture when, they're marketing it as new modern luxury apartments. It's just they're diluting the word. But true modernism and contemporary in, like West Coast style
Mm-hmm.
hillside homes, Australian architecture, like that stuff, it just, I'm obsessed with it. It's so well done, and the reason why is because everything is so intentional and really, really thoughtful.
Right.
So there's just really clean lines. It's very simple. The use of materials is really just incredibly well thought out, and that's what really I appreciate. Now, I don't want to pigeonhole myself, because I actually really appreciate traditional. I love interior trim. I
Mm-hmm.
love when it's done well,
Mm-hmm.
and the I look at it in two different lights, where, I think our custom builds will always be client driven. And I don't know if we'll ever get to a point where our customs are only contemporary. Maybe we'll get to a point where it's like, NS Builders broke the contemporary market. They're the best contemporary builder. That's the only thing they build.
Right.
Right now, I don't see that. I see, if we get into building a spec or a for sale property, yes, then I see us building like what I envision in
Right.
my head as a product. And because I believe that this, Boston just, it will support it. It just, like, people don't have that option when they're out there looking for a home.
Right. In
So
your market.
they're yeah, in our market, where
Yeah.
it's, what if we put it on our market? It might get to a point where it's like, yeah, I've been waiting
For
for someone
sure
to
it
do it.
is. I'm sure. I mean, you guys are
Oh,
so big.
agreed.
There's 100%
Right.
somebody waiting for that. So I want to talk to you about that, because you have a wildly popular podcast. I recommend everybody listen to it. The Modern Craftsman. It's you and a couple other construction industry people, Johnny and Tyler.
Yep.
And so we'll link to that, because it's definitely every Monday. It's like on my list. I listen to it. So it's called The Modern Craftsman, and I wanted to ask you. I think we've talked about this before. Is it part of that, like, you guys trying to bring some sort of quality back to the market? Maybe it started that way, maybe it's not anymore. I wanted to talk about that, but then I also wanted to ask you this question, which is, I'm sure you don't, but do you look down on building companies who are out there to make a profit and like, hey, here's the market.
No.
They want like these condos. I'm just going to bang them out and make some money. You know what
No,
I
I understand your question, and I know it's deeper than that. So
mean?
let me do my best to answer it. I don't look down on companies that are looking to make a profit.
Right.
I would look down on a company that is intentionally putting out inferior products or dangerous products
Right.
or
I think
dangerous
that's it.
living. It's if you're intentionally putting out a product that I'm going to just use the word dangerous, whatever that means,
Yeah, no,
whether it's
I
structurally
get, yeah.
dangerous, mold, whatever. Like
Right.
if you're intentionally doing it, yes, I think you're scum.
Right. And that's
But
that's what's given this industry in some ways a really bad name.
right, the reference that you make as far as no, we just we're in here, we're going to turn and burn 150 homes this year. I don't look down on that. There's a huge market for
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
And that market's never going to go away. There's, I would say, the majority of people in this world really don't care what their house looks like.
Mm-hmm.
If I get a roof over my head and I don't have to deal with anything, like, I'm good.
Right.
Yeah, they just have to understand it's a different market. It's like, it's so easy to refer to cars, right? It's like going out and buying a Camry or going out and buy, a Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're not buying the Ferrari because it's going to get you from point A to point
Right.
B in a better or a better manner.
Mm-hmm.
It's because you want to spend a lot of money on a fancy car,
Or you
and like
appreciate
that,
high end
yeah,
quality, like the
right,
leather
or
and
you're
like, yeah.
exactly like there's an appreciation for it, for whatever your motive might be.
Right.
It's just a different market, and I think people can attribute homes differently than that, and they shouldn't, because it's the guy building track homes versus the guy building customs. It's yes, it's classified as a home, but it's a totally different product.
Absolutely. And so it's just so your modern craftsman sort of vibe is more about like people
It
under
really it's yeah
I guess is it about people understanding the amount of thought and craft and like hard work it goes into making something truly custom or truly like good quality?
you know what Paul, it's it's hard to answer that, but the show is about peer to peer.
Right. That
It's
yeah.
not like it's not about the client listening and be like, yeah, I gotta hire Nick.
Right.
It's so much about peer to peer, in the sense that when we're talking to individuals, ourselves included, that we're open and we talk about our challenges and how we built our business and things that you otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like even simple things like taxes. Like, why don't we learn in school what we're going to pay in taxes if we start a business?
Right.
It took me 3 years to figure that out.
I think people are trying to figure out what people want to listen to, and I equate it to what I know. I've lived in sales, business to business, specifically to construction companies, but I think there is a huge shift to content, and you can actually correlate that to sales. And you were just talking about that. You're trying to maybe spend some more time on your sales process, and I think that's great, and we should get into that. But it's like people just want the real. Like they can go find everything online. So
right, and it really comes down to being relatable. If you sit on a podcast and talk with a guy that has a super successful building company and talks about all the wealth he's made, and how many houses he builds, and he gets to work on Michael Jordan's house, and like whatever, all these like crazy things, it's like, what, man, I just can't relate to this guy.
Right.
But if he started off the conversation where it's like, yeah, I remember when it was me and my pickup, and I had $50 in my bank account, and I had to go back to fix this house that I couldn't get. All right, now we're listening, and it's that's the whole premise behind what we were trying to do, is that we want to be in a position where we can talk and share stories and be relatable, so people don't feel as though they're alone, because all of us at one point or the other felt as though, man, I am the only one in this industry that can't get my shit together.
Right. Oh,
And
that's a great point.
and it's it's really like even to this day, Paul, like I there's times I drive home and I'm like, what am I doing? It's like everyone else has got this figured out, and I shake it and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm fooling myself, like, because, and especially nowadays, and it's so easy, like I said earlier, it's like
Mm-hmm.
through social media, there's this level of filter, right? You're getting only to see the cool sexy stuff,
Right.
where it's, we try to do our best about being real and being open about our challenges and our failures, because other people need that more than a lot of us understand.
For
There's
sure.
guys out there struggling with depression,
Yep.
where
Mm-hmm.
now we're talking about mental health
Mm-hmm.
that is being compromised because of what this industry decides to showcase and what it decides to hide.
Yeah. Anxiety gets used so much, like that word. So part of me goes like, man, we overuse that word. But, maybe it needs to be chopped up and like better defined of what that means for the scenario you're in. But what you're basically saying is like every business owner, when they're on an island, they have this anxiety about like, why am I in this position? Has everybody been in this position once, or am I going to make it through it? Like, but basically, through listening to the Modern Craftsman, you guys do a great job of that, by the way. But you do a good job. All three of you do a good job of like breaking that down, and basically everybody's been through those hard times. And I think what we talked about off air before we get on is like, let's get details on that. Like, don't just tell me you were broke and then you got a couple jobs. Like, how broke were you? Like, tell me that. And like, how'd you get out of it? Specifically, tell me that, because as you said, that's going to help so many more people out.
It's funny, Paul. Since you said that, I'm like, all right. Now every podcast going forward, I'm just gonna ask. Like, they're gonna try to keep moving forward, and I'm just gonna keep pulling the rope. Like, no, keep going. We're going backwards.
I think
man.
you should. Well, everybody loves, like, I guess not everybody loves Joe Rogan, but Joe Rogan's like the podcast king. But he's got 4-hour podcasts, and I find myself liking those the most because it's just like there's no timetable. Like, let's just have the conversation.
Him? Right. That exactly, and that's I listen to him. I listen to him a lot, but when I do listen to him, I listen to him with two different motives. I'm interested in what they're talking about, but I'm even more interested in the way Joe interviews, where it's he really lets the guest talk, and the only time he's interrupting is when they like skate over something, where it's like, just like you said, it's like, yeah, I started my company and I was really broke, and then I've been whoa. Like, what do you, like, you just skimmed over the fact that you were really broke, like, digging. And that's the way he approaches these things, and make sure that, like, I think I attribute this to kind of how I do it on our podcast, is that I'm trying to be the advocate for the listener.
Yeah,
like, I know that the moment the listener, like, there's times where it's like, hey, wait a second, he's contradicting himself. I have to, like, if I don't call him out for contradicting what he just said, everyone's going to discredit this podcast.
Yeah. Or they're just going to lose interest, or it's
it's like, this guy's lying.
Yeah.
And it's, and it's awkward too, right? Like, I'm sitting across, like, I mean, it's Zoom, so it's a little less awkward, but I'm like, whoa, 10 minutes ago you said something different. Like, where is this coming from? Or or just asking the question of, I bought the company off my dad, and all right, well, how much did you buy the company off your dad for?
Right. Where'd you get the money?
And
like,
and he's like, and I'm like, dude, this is what people are listening to, and they're going to be screaming at their radio if we don't ask these questions.
Right. If we wanted to tune into, like you said, the filtered version, we've got that all day long. Like, you see the filtered picture of the happiest couple in the world on the beach, but what you didn't see is like how he stepped out her dress 10 minutes earlier and she yelled at him, or vice versa. Like, I would rather see all that, and then that gives me context of it all, and I would appreciate more if I saw the whole thing. So the other podcast, people are
scared.
Yeah, exactly, and they want to, like, I think you nailed it. Like, they want to know they're in the boat with somebody else, not alone, or at some point somebody's been in that same boat with them.
The one other point I wanted to mention is, like, you also have to teeter the scale, where it's like, I have to remain professional enough, because if I spill everything, there's this point where it's like, all right, does this guy have any idea what he's doing? Like, why would I hire him? Right. So it's you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And kind of teeter that scale, like, being authentic and true, but also being professional.
Right. And this is what I know now. You know, there's this great adage of like, I don't know. It's like if you're a contractor and you come in and you fix something in 10 minutes, it's like, well, you're not paying me for my 10 minutes. You're paying me for my 20 years of learning that 10 minutes. So I think even explaining that you didn't know it all, I mean, doesn't mean that you don't know it all now or well on it. So I can't tell people not to listen to Modern Craftsman podcast because it is sort of the long form, which is great. Like throw it on and you know, do your work or work out over it because it's great. But then you spun up another one. I just want it from your perspective, like what are the differences of the two different podcasts you have?
The one we just recently launched.
Yeah. So like Nick is the Nick Schiffer podcast.
The Nick Schiffer podcast. So that one is just more. It's like 10, 15-minute spurts.
Right.
And we have the extensive video catalog, and we just get a lot of questions where it's like, hey, like I just looked at one just before we hopped on. It's like, I'd love you to dig into how you review your employees. What's that look like?
Perfect.
And I'm like, we could talk about this for hours, but let's just do a 10, 15-minute interview on it. And so very recently, as in like 2 episodes ago, I'm bringing in one of my guys because I'm way better at when it's conversational.
Yeah,
for sure. It's like if two of us are chatting, like I want Ken's perspective, I want Mike and Nick and I want my team's perspective on what I'm saying, because when it's just me staring at a camera, I feel as though I'm speaking truthfully.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like there's times where I question, like, all right, is that in fact what I do when I'm on site?
Yeah.
And I want, and having that feedback, I think there's some legitimacy to that.
For sure.
It is. It's really specific about one topic. We dig into it. I get as in depth and transparent as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really just like in addition to the Modern Craftsman. It's it's just another opportunity where, let's talk about like personal brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the business brand, but personal brand, I've always chose the authentic and the transparent approach and the open to share, because if I don't answer the question as to how we do reviews, someone else is going to, right? Or it's like, how do you estimate a project, or can you share how you do this, like the trade secret?
Right.
If I don't share it, someone else is going to share it anyway, and then they become the professional in the industry, and I'm discredited and I'm forgotten about.
So that's how because I ask a lot of people this. Like I ask a lot of people who share like really like very specific ways you do things as a business that's made you successful.
Right.
Is the way you think of it like, why keep that a secret? Because I can execute. Like, you're not worried, because there's knowing how to do it and then there's executing, and both things have to happen at a pretty high degree to be really great.
Right. I mean, the if they execute at the same level or better than me, great. The chances of that, with anyone executing what someone else is telling them to do is low.
Right.
So
exactly.
But but the other side of it, it's pushing us to be innovative and like constantly be on the leading edge, right? Like if we're gonna share something, then that better be like, we better be better than that next time. But to go back to my original point, if we walk through the process and share how we do something, we're the professional that they come back to.
Right.
Where if we don't and they find another professional, that becomes their resource, and our reach is now narrowed because we're holding too much tight to the chest.
Right. I love that. I love the way of thinking about it, because I think for so many years in this industry, because I've spoken to company owners and they're just like, yeah, this is our secret. Like, I don't want competition. I think that's transitioning, and I think it's in a good way. It's one of those things like a rising tide, lifts all ships. And I think we need that to a certain degree, because there's just plenty of business to go get out there. And
right. And
you shouldn't be afraid of that.
And I do think that we're getting to this era where there is a shift to that.
Yeah.
Way more sharing, it's way more collaboration. I think it's Tom Silva that said it, collaboration over competition, where it's, let's collaborate, and that's the way I want to work. When I can't do a job, or when a job isn't the right fit for us, I hate when I can't refer someone. Like, I would love to have 10 guys in my back pocket where I could be like, yep, that's a great fit for this guy. I have 2 that I shell out, every once in a while, where it's usually on like the edge of like, I don't know if this is a really good fit for them, but at
Right.
least like I know if they do take it, they'll do a good job.
Right. Or at
Where
least
it's
they'll
like,
handle that lead, I guess you give them with care.
right,
And like they're not gonna
exactly, and it's like,
screw it up in some way.
yeah.
Well, that's
So it
important.
is. It's it really should be way more collaborative than it is.
Yeah, well I love it. So I think they're the producing people behind this podcast always want to give this like podcast a theme, and right now it's
Sure.
just Paul and Nick talking, which I think is great.
Yeah.
So let me just
That's actually that might trend on Twitter, like
Yeah.
Paul and Nick talking.
Yeah. So one of those, the Nick Schiffer podcast, let's say I lob a question to you like, how do you plan for the year? So like people are planning for 2021 right now. So like, what does that look like with you? Or what's advice to somebody out there? Like if I've never, because I think a lot of construction companies are in this boat. We don't plan, we just like, boom, job. Like, let's keep doing it. And that's not a bad thing, obviously. But if I was going to take the step to plan, like, what does it look like from the most base?
So you asked two questions here.
Yeah.
So the first question you asked is how I would answer that. So I wanted to, if someone lobbed that question at me and say I didn't plan or I didn't know, I would still answer it because I want, number one, I want to answer the question,
Mm-hmm.
but I would walk through like, hey, I don't plan for the year and this is why.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're asking the second question is what am I doing for 2021? The interesting thing with 2020 was that a lot of things kept getting delayed. So, we didn't have as many job starts as we had intended. So while we remained busy, while we continued to work, thankfully we were able to, we actually brought in another project to allow us to keep working. We didn't have the expected job starts and completions that we set out to.
Mm-hmm.
So that throws off our 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, in one mindset, it's tough because you're, it's always, at least for me, I think of like, oh my gosh, like we're gonna end 2020 on this terrible note, and then January 1 is all of a sudden this brand new fresh page of paper.
Right.
It's like, wait a second, that's
Doesn't work.
that's
that
not
way.
reality.
Yeah,
It's like you're just gonna keep on going.
Right.
Let's focus on Q1, forget Q4.
Right.
Like, what are we doing for Q1, Q2?
Mm-hmm.
So for us, it's really been a matter of preparing for the projects that we can control,
Mm-hmm.
preparing for getting the right job starts in line. We've taken opportunities this year, for me, a lot of reflecting of who I am, who I am as a leader, taking more time to sit down with my people
Mm-hmm.
and understand where I was screwing up, like where what was I lacking at. I could see morale drop. I could see, communication drop. I could see issues internally and externally, and I realized that it was me. It was my approach to handling everything that we handled this year. Looking at 2021, it's like, all right, if we're gonna go after the clientele we want, the projects that we want, the things that we want, here's an opportunity for us to hunker down, work internally, improve our systems, hire the right people, get the people that we have in the right positions, work with them to set and obtain their goals professionally and personally, and then work towards that. And really just allowing the company as a whole to talk to me and explain what works, what doesn't, what needs to improve, how can I make their job better, and taking that and then implementing it. But also from the other side of it is being you know unapologetic to the point where I know what we want, and I know that we're young as a company, but I'm going to go after it, and we're going to put ourselves in positions to be in the projects that we deserve to be in, because I know the quality that we can put out, and I know the execution that we can obtain, and I know that we're fit to go after some of these projects that we otherwise haven't had the opportunity to.
Yeah, that's
So,
a great sort of like ethos for a business, right?
Yeah, I
For
mean
you.
it is. We're genuine. I genuinely believe that we're in a position where we can go after the things that we really want, and but only if I take the time, if we take the time to restructure and become unite as a team and approach this, and everyone gets on the same page, everyone understands our why, everyone
Mm-hmm.
understands what we're after, and everyone believes in it. that's by far step one, and that's, you know, really, as we wrap up Q4 here, that's our focus going into Q1 is, you know, reunite as a team, and then go into the first quarter, second quarter, you know, essentially just, you know, charging towards, you know, that next goal.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that I've never been obviously a construction business owner, you have, and we talk to so many of them. Is it fair to say that a good piece of advice would really take a stock of the things you can control and focus on those? Because I think, let me just kind of, why I ask that is, like, I think a lot of people are worried about the market and like what's coming next and like what's the stock market could do and how's that's going to affect people's willingness to buy and all that kind of thing. And you really can't control that, right? So is it fair to say that a good piece of advice would be take stock of what you can control, your employees, your processes, you know, your sales process, like make sure you follow up on every lead, like that kind of thing. Is that fair?
It is fair. And it's funny. I got the chills when you said that, because yesterday, I don't know if you're a Jocko fan.
What is that?
Jocko Willink, he's a Navy SEAL author, podcast. He's just like a leadership guy. He's like all about leadership.
Yeah.
And this guy Spencer Lewis on Instagram, Insider Carpentry, posted this story, and I hope he listens to this. A dog peed on his tools in the garage, and he wrote back, and he posted a photo of it, and he wrote good. Like, I'm glad they did. And he writes good because, you know what, that toolbox needed to be cleaned. Oh, yeah. And I dug into it more and reminded myself of like Jocko's mentality of, you know, hey, the market crashed. Good. Now it gives us the opportunity to restructure. Mm-hmm. Hey, COVID hit and you had to shut down. Good. It gives you the opportunity to restructure and talk and figure out how to improve. Hey, you lost that big job. Good. Now you have time to refocus and go after another one. Mm-hmm. Hey, this client sucks and, you know, and is driving you crazy and doesn't, you know, maybe won't pay you. Good. Now you'll restructure your contract to make sure you're protected for the next one. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard. It's and even for me, it's, you know, when I saw that just 2 days ago, I was like, you know what, that's how my mind was in 2019 and 2020. I've let it impact me too much, where it's like, I need to look at this as an opportunity of good. Mm-hmm. So I think you're absolutely spot on, is that, you know, what can I control? I can't control if the client's going to be a dink or not. Like, mm-hmm. I have to roll with it. If they're a great client, good. If they're a bad client, good.
Right.
And how do we learn from that? How do we come out and improve on that? And it's just, it's a much better mentality, and it's so much easier from, like you talked about earlier, anxiety, mm-hmm. where, you know, it's like you could sit there and worry about getting paid from that client, and like that's a real thing
for sure.
Like that could put someone out of business. There's mm-hmm. no doubt about that, including myself. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not exempt from that.
Right.
But if I let that control my thought process, I end up on these worst case scenario, not paid, worst case scenario, can't pay rent, worst case scenario, can't pay payroll, worst case. Then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I lose my house in this mind, sure. in this trail of mind, mm-hmm. you know, of thoughts, where it's like all of those are worst case scenario. What if best case scenario, he pays you tomorrow? Right. It's like, why aren't you thinking of that, or somewhere in between?
Sure.
So yeah, I think, you know, it's absolutely fair to say, focus on what you can control, and, you know, appreciate the things that you can't.
Yeah. I think I just saw one of those like Instagram posts that, like, you know, Target sells on like a sign or whatever, but you know, there's a inch of truth to everything. It's like 2020 was where I was going to go get everything I didn't have. But I realized 2020 is where I appreciate everything I did have. Yeah. There's like, you know, there's silver lining there. Yeah. All right. We'll end on some good notes there. Nick, always appreciate the time, man. This is the third time having you on. We'll hopefully get you again. Good luck in 2021. Keep killing it. Everybody listening, go listen to The Modern Craftsman. Subscribe. The Nick Schiffer podcast is new. Subscribe there. And then you got some, you're on YouTube and all, LinkedIn and all that stuff, right?
We do. Yeah. We're coming in with some heavy YouTube content. So.
Awesome. Love YouTube. So check them out there. Again, wish you the best, my man. Appreciate it.
Take care, man. Be well.
See ya. Thank you again for tuning in to this episode of The Building Code. Make sure you subscribe and like wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, head out to Facebook and join the Building Code crew. And finally, drop me a line at podcast@buildertrend.com. We want to hear from you, suggestions on guests or topics, anything. Thanks so much for joining and appreciate you.